Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
Here in episode 52, we're joined by Diane Newton, an Associate Vice President at HNTB, where we talk about her company's role in transforming how freight gets moved and what intelligent transportation systems really are. She also shares takeaways from the Columbus, Ohio Smart City Project. We talk about the I-70 Truck Automation Corridor Program, and she encourages everyone to stay engaged and understand the role of how technology in transportation makes for a more efficient and clean movement of goods. Today we have joining us Diane Newton. She's an Associate Vice President at HNTB, and we're going to get an explanation of that here really soon. It's a real pleasure to have you on today, Diane. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so, I always ask my guests, because the title's Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends, how we met, how we got to become friends and start working together. I don't think it's been that long ago, Diane, but do you remember and recall?
I remember that our worlds collided around the area of electrification and more specifically freight electrification. I had my colleagues in Ohio were working on a freight EV study for the Ohio Department of Transportation, more specifically their innovation arm and office, Drive Ohio. And I believe that they connected with NACFE on the topic of user needs and best practices for freight electrification. And we interviewed you guys about your Run on Less demonstration program. And shortly thereafter, we had an opportunity with Drive Ohio for a freight technology project. And we needed a critical element of that was outreach to fleets on the topic of automation and automation specifically in freight. And we brought NACFE onto our team for that proposal.
Yeah, we're going to get into that here in a little bit. That was an easy one to respond to because Dave Schaller and I, Dave's a Purdue graduate, I'm an Ohio State graduate, so we get a project that works with both the state of Indiana and Ohio. we're it's easy for us to say yes to it. That's a fun project. But tell us a little bit about HNTB. I mean, you're doing some really great work in this arena of the technologies that are coming to transform how freight's moved and in trucking in particular. But tell us about the company and it's in this area of intelligent transportation systems, and I'm really intrigued by what that is and that whole area and who works in the space. So tell us about it.
Sure. Well, HNTB is an architecture and engineering firm with a national presence. We have about 5,000 employees. A lot of people know us for more traditional engineering projects around roadways and bridges and utility design. We also build some football stadiums. So we are a well-rounded architecture and engineering firm, but there is a core practice of about 200 staff or so that focus completely on intelligent transportation systems and emerging mobility. We are a team of engineers that focus on projects that build out agencies' digital infrastructure, which is sort of using data from multiple sources and multiple modes and transforming that into action. We also do a lot of what the community considers traditional ITS, both in vehicles and on the roadside. This is a lot of work around the communications technology for vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure communications and applications. And we're doing a lot now in the areas of emerging mobility, building out and designing software and applications that automate existing characteristics like planning and payment for multimodal trips within the transportation ecosystem. So inherently, that type of work is more transit and multimodal and service oriented. But we do have a whole part of our ITS and emerging mobility practice is automating freight transactions and the inspection and paperwork trail that is inherent in sort of the enforcement and inspection capabilities that state agencies are responsible for.
And it's so fascinating. I mean, I've had a career in trucking, and different jobs over my career sort of got into the logistics side of things. But this is a really exciting area. I mean, I've always thought that moving goods, we're pretty efficient at it in the United States, but just the amount of information technology that's out there that can help improve all these transactions. And we did a report a couple of years ago where we said you need four things to move freight. You need a tractor and a trailer, a driver, and the freight itself. And we concluded that now we know where all four are. We never have known. We've got GPS
Right.
on all four. So how do we do it? And I was thinking about this ITS. I mean, you and I actually were in Louisville together at the Midwest ITS conference, and I remember sitting there looking at how state folks are looking at weather data, and they're predicting accidents and congestion and all kinds of really exciting information. It was a great couple of days in Louisville. Tell us a little bit more maybe about how do those not just about what HNTB is doing, but what's the opportunity here for improving transportation using all this data and this technology that's emerging?
Well, yeah, HNTB inherently our focus is on state and local agencies. We serve the public sector primarily, the state and local level. Me in particular, I'm focused in Indiana and Ohio, but I also work on projects and pursuits of national significance that are really advancing these more emerging ideas around all things. ACES is sort of the acronym that we use: automated, connected, electric, and shared. We help agencies on the program management side and the systems engineering, which is sort of the concept development, requirements building process for these emerging technology solutions. And then we also work a lot with agencies on how can they integrate these solutions into just the traditional transportation systems management and operations. Obviously, the public sector and infrastructure owner operators have defined responsibilities, but technology, as you mentioned, can improve their ability to manage these things, especially on the topic of things like incident and weather response, congestion management, signal performance measures. It can help them measure performance and identify potential problem areas that they want to improve. So we do a lot on that integration side. And we also have what we refer to as an innovation council. We are connected with about 80 or so private companies, and we can connect our public sector clients to these private sector firms who are really on the forefront and delivering these innovative products and solutions. It's completely just a way to help our public sector clients maintain an awareness of not only what's out there currently, but what's on the horizon. And then we also have a lot of subject matter expertise and staff who are involved in the research and development of standards and certification. These more emerging solutions are, in the process of becoming more standardized through groups like SAE and Omniair, and there's research happening at the federal level, as well as on the academic side. So we are involved in organizations like the Transportation Research Board and ITS America. You mentioned, we connected at ITS Midwest. So sort of providing that thought leadership at the national level is another resource that we provide to our clients.
Tell us about you and how you got into this, because I know you, and the audience is already hearing your passion for this work. So how'd you get here, and why is this important to you?
Well, I actually went to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy for my bachelor's degree. So I grew up or came of age in the freight and logistics industry. I got to see sort of containerization in practice from the maritime side, certainly. And once I got my bachelor's degree, then I got my master's degree in systems engineering and operations research, which is all about sort of the procedural and design process for any type of emerging technology process, because it manages risk. So I've been at HNTB for 4 years, but prior to that, I worked for a consulting company that worked primarily with the federal side, with the United States Department of Transportation's ITS Joint Program Office. So I worked in this space of ITS and connected vehicle research for about 17 years before I came to HNTB. And a lot of the projects that were federally funded were pilot and test projects that the feds worked with local public and private sector partners to sort of test and prove out. And I kind of stayed in the freight space. There is a Federal Highway Administration Office of Freight Management. They partnered a lot with US DOT's Joint Program Office. So I made a lot of connections and worked on pilot projects, specifically in the areas of commercial vehicle enforcement, sort of the drayage community. And when I got the opportunity to come to HNTB in 2017, I sort of jumped at the chance to move from the research side to the more widespread deployment of ITS and connected and automated vehicles at the state and local level. I felt like at that time there was this movement toward the widespread adoption of these technologies. And I wanted to be sort of boots on the ground working with state and local agencies to help to advance those deployments and move research forward, really.
Yeah, so making it real, right? Coming out of the labs and making it real. So hey, I wanted to get into this goes back a little bit of time over the last 5 years and so forth, but Columbus, Ohio won the Department of Transportation's Smart City Challenge. I think I got that right. I'm trying to remember exactly, but Columbus won the 5-year, I think $40 million grant. And that's now completed. You were in part, or you were involved in that, right? And tell us a little bit about, tell us about that. I mean, how exciting. I remember when the competition was going on, and then, very exciting that you won. And then curious how what came of all that?
Well, the challenge began in 2015, and you're right. It was a $40 million grant that was put out there in 2015. 78 cities applied, and then 7 finalists were selected. And those 7 finalists were provided like $1 million in seed money to write their applications. And at that point, HNTB had been involved in the initial application. And then once Columbus was selected as a finalist, we worked with them to develop the grant application. And when they were selected as the winner, then we have supported the program ever since. So we were involved on the program management and systems engineering side for the entire program from 2015 all the way through this past year. And Smart Columbus was a portfolio of 8 projects. It started out as 15, and over the course of the first year, projects were sort of merged, combined, cut. There was the systems engineering process, and user needs really defined the final 8 projects that were selected. But the overarching goal of the entire program was focused on mobility being an equalizer for the community in Columbus. The vision was to use technology to empower residents in Columbus to live their best lives through responsive, innovative, and safe mobility solutions. They really wanted to demonstrate how ITS and equitable access to transportation can help cities face everyday challenges. So kind of moving past demonstrating technology because it's cool to demonstrating technology because it's solving a community need. There was 8 projects. They sort of fell under 3 themes. And we had the enabling technologies sort of was a connected vehicle project that leveraged their existing advanced traffic signal system and deployed additional safety and mobility applications through the connected vehicle environment. There was a handful of software applications that provided enhanced human services. Those technologies, those solutions focused on preventing and remediating problems and improving overall quality of life for different transportation users in the community. And then they had an emerging technology project, which was their automated vehicle project, which sought to show how technologies that are in development or will be developed can still substantially alter the business and social environment. So in the case of Columbus, that was an automated vehicle deployment. It was a first mile, last mile solution that connected an opportunity neighborhood with transit and community resources. So all told, there was 8 projects, and COVID hit in the middle of it, which certainly slowed us down and shortened the demonstration timeframe, just because the first 6 months or so of COVID, no one was going anywhere. So
Right.
we were still proud of what we were able to accomplish even coming out of COVID. We extended the program by a few months to better measure the impact of these 8 projects. But 5 of the 8 projects really continued on past the life of the grant, which ended in June of 2021.
Yeah, and as you were talking about some of the original goals and so forth, I mean, and you think through some of what's top of mind for a lot of us now around environmental justice and communities and resiliency, some of those things that I think were back in 2015 became more real
Right.
the last few years with a lot of new understanding or better understanding about some of the solutions we need. So quite interesting. What what would be a couple of really proud things that came out of that for you, that, or maybe the city? I mean, I know you talked through the projects, but what's a couple of favorites that probably the Smart City Award helped do that might not otherwise been accomplished there in Columbus?
I think there's two things that really jump out in my mind, and the first is sort of making these newer modes more accessible to the community. Two of the projects, there was a smart mobility hub project and a multimodal trip planning application, both of which the city was able to kind of put out a bike share again in that opportunity neighborhood that was not planned originally. They partnered with Kogo. It really extended some of these more innovative bike share, scooter share models into an opportunity neighborhood where, quite frankly, these resources would not have been dropped off. You know, you think about how scooters descended on cities across the country. They were being dropped off in, tourist areas and major downtown areas, but not in neighborhoods to really act as a mobility solution. So I think that's one thing that really was a moment of pride. And the second thing was just the connection to the community throughout the program. There was a real focus on co-creation. So we worked with community liaisons in Linden, which is that opportunity neighborhood. And they also kind of continued to develop the workforce on the connected vehicle project. In particular, the city sought out automotive shops in the opportunity neighborhood of Linden who were interested in learning about connected vehicle technology, how it is installed, how it operates on vehicles. And they supported the installation of over 1,000 onboard units in those vehicles. So I think really it all is focused around the people in Columbus, both integrating them into the development process and then continuing, advancing that knowledge and making them a part of the solution and developing the workforce for the future.
Oh, so cool. So cool. That is so exciting. So, all right, so let's move forward now. And back to this project that you're working on automated and connected trucks in Ohio and Indiana. I mean, right now, we're seeing tests and deployments, early deployments and testing and so forth out west, where there's New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, where there's not a lot of traffic, there's not a lot of anything, and here we got this project here in quite busier interstate systems in Ohio and Indiana. So take us through who funded it, what's the timeline, what's going to be accomplished, and a little bit maybe about some of the challenges that you're seeing, or that we're seeing, I should say. Here we're in it about we've been working about 9 months maybe on the project.
Yeah, just coming up, but we're coming up on a year. So this was a 4-year grant funded by the Federal Highway Administration's Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technology Deployment. It's quite a mouthful. ATC-MTD is the grant program. That grant program has been around for the last couple of years. So this was an application that was jointly made by the Indiana and Ohio Departments of Transportation in 2019. And they were then selected as a recipient in 2020. And, federal contracting moves super, super fast, as you know. So we actually were able to, they finally signed their cooperative agreement in February of last year. And then the major work, major effort, major momentum started in June of 2021. But the purpose of this project, as you mentioned, is to demonstrate truck automation technology with companies, with trucking fleets in revenue service. That's probably the key. I want to say it's the fact that we want to work with trucking fleets in operation. And then, like you said, tackle that edge case. To ultimately achieve widespread adoption, we have to get out of the Southwest and even Southeast. I mean, these technologies have to operate in all 4 seasons. And, Ohio and Indiana are embracing technology. They want to assist and be a partner to the private sector in exploring how it can be used. So that really is the goal, it's a partnership between Indiana and Ohio Department of Transportation and FHWA, along with the Transportation Research Center, who is participating in the project. And they wanted to deploy and demonstrate 3 levels of truck automation: platooning, which is considered level 1. Platooning is obviously a convoy of 2 or more trucks, with the lead truck being driven manually. Level 2 is a partially automated truck, much like the technology that's available in passenger cars today. And level 4 is very similar to Teslas and some of the other self-driving passenger cars that are on the road today. Level 4 is a highly automated vehicle that can perform all the driving functions without a driver. So Level 4 is really just entering the market in commercial vehicles today. There are no true driverless operations of this technology, but several companies are piloting, testing, and creating partnerships, which is working toward that adoption in the coming years. So that's the major element of the project, but secondary, I mentioned TRC. TRC is helping to understand the role of the infrastructure owner operator. This is Indiana DOT and Ohio DOT by conducting a route audit of I-70. The desired deployment area is on I-70 because it is the major corridor that connects the two states. So TRC will be auditing I-70 between Columbus and Indianapolis, using vehicles equipped with similar technology to that's on these automated trucks. And that audit will gather data about I-70's road condition and how it affects the operation of automation technology. So it's really gathering, they're driving this section of road, multiple times. They've already started this process. And this will help the agencies to not only identify and correct the deficiencies on this portion of I-70, but using that data and that methodology, the analysis methodology, they'll be creating an open source tool that will help other state DOTs if they are interested in assessing their own roadways. So the final element, in addition to the road audit and the deployment, we'll be doing a lot of information sharing with the private sector so that we can help them all understand the necessary activities to make our public roadways and private business operations ready for automated vehicles.
Yeah, and we were so excited to get involved formally. NACV's informally involved in a lot of projects like these, but here we're working with HNTB and to really help find those freight partners, and it's a lot of fun, and it fits what NACV's trying to do. I mean, we're working in the automation space because there is an efficiency benefit, there's a productivity benefit where some trucks can be operated more hours of the day, on and on. So, and it's real world. So, really excited about it. Now, you actually have sort of a challenge right now for our listeners to maybe get involved in this project, right? Because we're beginning to select who might be the fleet partners and different characters, right?
That's right. The first year, we're coming up on finishing our first year, as I mentioned. So we've focused a lot the first year around creating the foundation, understanding what the schedule looks like. But we've been doing a lot of engagement and having a lot of discussions with technology developers, trucking fleets, OEMs, kind of trying to understand their readiness for the technology and assess their interest in projects like this one. And also just familiarize them with the technology and make them aware of these potential opportunities. So kind of leading up to that, and at the end of last year, we developed a request for information that was just published. It was published on March 22nd, and that RFI will be open until May 2nd. And the purpose of that is really to identify the interest among potential participants. We really left it open. We directed it to anybody who's interested in being a part of this project, whether it's a technology developer, whether it's a trucking fleet, whether it's an OEM, whether it's a research entity. We're looking for any and all potential partners who are interested in these three types of demonstrations: the platooning, the level 2, and the level 4. So the other thing that the RFI was released on March 22nd. We'll be having a webinar to answer questions sort of in real time on April 19th at 10 a.m. But we hope to find responses from these interested parties and put together deployment teams. These deployment teams will include, we expect, any and all companies and firms that want to participate and execute these technology deployments. And the agencies, Drive Ohio and INDOT, plan to make multiple awards. So we'll use the RFI and all of the questions that we ask of potential prospective participants to create an RFP. The RFP will be released in the summer of 2022. And ultimately, we hope to award, one or more projects in the fall of 2022 so that we can get these technologies out there, collect data and measure performance and measure the impact over, at least 6 to 9 months, ideally up to a year if we're able to, and publish results in early 2025.
Wow, very cool. So if people want to get involved, how do they do that?
So the RFI is currently posted to the Ohio Department of Transportation's website. There's also within that RFI a link to the webinar that I mentioned on April 19th. And they can also contact you or me, and we're happy to connect them with Drive Ohio and INDOT, as we're both involved in the project. And I would really encourage people to just stay engaged, reach out to you or me and ask questions.
Yeah, we're really excited about this. So we're about out of time, Diane. It always goes fast. What you're really working on projects where the rubber hits the road with these technologies. So a lot of our listeners are folks trying to figure out how to bring new ideas to the market or implement them in different ways. What maybe are a couple of pieces of advice, or what would you have them do to be more successful when it comes to deployments?
I think it's the two things that I sort of mentioned already, stay engaged, understanding the role of technology. I know that NACFE, you guys put out a whole bunch of interesting information, and it's very bite-sized. And if you have 5 minutes, you can certainly read an article that takes 5 minutes, but there's a lot of other more in-depth information if that's what you're looking for. And the public sector, the agencies like INDOT and Drive Ohio are really trying to garner even more interest by putting out projects like the I-70 truck automation corridor project. That is a perfect opportunity, especially for trucking companies who may be interested in technology but haven't really figured out how to plan for it strategically. It sort of gives them an opportunity to test drive, for lack of a better word, test drive this technology and figure out if it does really impact their business for the better. So there's opportunities out there through grant funded projects, because both the federal and state levels recognize the private sector's involvement and the importance of their involvement to drive widespread adoption.
Yeah. And companies like HNTB are there to help make it easy for those real end users to experience and work with the technology. So Diane, thank you so much for joining me. You're doing incredibly interesting work, and I learned a lot in the last half hour. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.